You know that feeling? When you say something, seems totally fine, but it lands wrong.
Mhm.
Like maybe a comment you meant well just causes confusion, or I don't know, a joke just completely bombs.
Oh, definitely. Happens all the time.
Makes you wonder, is it me or is there something else going on?
Right.
Well, that's exactly what we're getting into today. We're doing a deep dive into these cultural nuances
Yeah.
that really shape how we communicate
Yeah.
in English.
Yeah, because just knowing the words, it's often not enough, is it?
Not at all. You've got these like invisible cultural things happening that change how words get heard, how they're interpreted,
Yeah.
especially across different backgrounds.
And that's super important knowledge, particularly if you're dealing with people internationally.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So we've looked at some really interesting discussions, on cross-cultural communication,
Okay.
and there was this great podcast specifically on how English gets used differently around the world.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So our mission today really is to give you a practical hander on how culture messes with English communication. Sort of a shortcut to being well-informed, maybe drop a few surprising facts
What
too.
does it make you go, aha?
Exactly. Things that you, the listener, can actually use.
It is pretty amazing, though. English, it's this global connector, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the very thing that makes it so useful, its flexibility, also means you get these, well, rich, but sometimes kind of tricky cultural variations.
Yeah, it's not just about dodging big grammar mistakes.
No, not at all. It's the subtle stuff, the shades of meaning. That's where misunderstandings can creep in, even when everyone sounds like they're speaking the same language.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this. A really helpful starting point from our sources is this idea of high context versus low context cultures. Can you maybe paint a picture of what that actually means?
Sure, yeah. Think of it like, how much unspoken info do you need for communication to work? So, in high context cultures, think places like Japan, China, a lot of the message isn't actually in the words. It's implicit. It's carried in nonverbal cues, shared history, the whole situation, really.
So you have to sort of read between the lines.
Exactly. You have
Yeah.
to be tuned in to what's not being said. There's this heavy reliance on shared cultural understanding.
So the meaning is kind of layered under the surface.
Precisely. Now, flip that. Low context cultures, say the US, Germany communication tends to be much more explicit, direct.
Right.
People try to say exactly what they mean, less guessing, less relying on that shared background info. Clarity, being upfront, that's valued.
Got it.
So just knowing roughly where a culture sits on that spectrum, that gives you a massive clue about their communication style right from the start.
That makes perfect sense. It's like in some cultures, the listener has more work to do picking up cues, while in others, the speaker feels more responsible for being totally clear.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And this difference must really impact how direct people are, right, in their actual language.
Oh, absolutely. Directness is like a classic example of where English varies culturally. American English, for instance, often very direct.
Yeah.
Someone might just say, I disagree with your point. And that's usually seen as just, clear.
Efficient.
Whereas the sources pointed out, British English often takes a more indirect route.
Right.
That same disagreement might sound more like, I'm not sure I completely agree with that. It's softer.
Exactly. And what's important to grasp is this indirectness in British culture. It's usually not about dodging the issue.
Okay.
It's often tied to cultural norms around politeness, avoiding bluntness. It's like being considerate in how you deliver it.
And this isn't just theoretical, it has real effects. That podcast source gave a great example. Brian Mullins, an American CEO in the UK.
Ah, yes, the quite good story.
That's the one. He heard quite good and thought, okay, American English, that's pretty positive, maybe very good.
But in British English, it just meant fairly good, average almost.
And that small difference, it really changed how he understood the feedback he was getting.
Wow.
Yeah, it really shows how these little linguistic choices, rooted in cultural habits about directness, can lead to totally different understandings.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Humor and idioms. These are so cultural, aren't they? Can be really tough ground.
Oh, incredibly tricky, even for really fluent English speakers from different places.
Right.
Humor especially. It banks so much on shared references, shared understandings. British humor, for example, often quite sarcastic, lots of understatement.
Like saying not bad when you actually mean that's brilliant.
Exactly. Classic case. You need the cultural key to unlock that meaning. This tendency towards understatement, it might come from a cultural thing about not wanting to seem overly enthusiastic or boastful. It's kind of a bonding thing, that shared irony.
And that American humor, maybe more.
Yeah.
Obvious. Sometimes self-deprecating to connect.
Could be, yeah. Different styles. And for someone not used to it, it's easy to just miss the joke. Or worse, misunderstand the intention.
Taking sarcasm literally or not getting that self-deprecation is meant to be humble.
Which is why that podcast advice was so spot on. If you're not sure about a joke, an idiom, just politely ask.
Yeah, good advice.
Seriously, most native speakers really appreciate you making the effort. It shows you're paying attention, trying to get the nuances. It's not seen as ignorance.
Definitely. Okay. So it's not just the words, it's also the nonverbal stuff. Gestures, eye contact, even how close people stand. Our sources really hit this point hard.
They did. And it's fascinating, isn't it? How a gesture that's totally normal, even positive somewhere,
Can be really rude somewhere else.
exactly. Or take eye contact. Some places, holding someone's gaze means you're confident, you're engaged. In other places, it might feel disrespectful, maybe even aggressive.
That difference alone could cause major misreads of someone's attitude, right? Or their honesty.
Absolutely. There was that story, wasn't there, about the colleague from Japan working in the U.S.?
Yes. Initially felt really uncomfortable with the amount of direct eye contact in meetings
Right. Perceived it as, well, confrontational.
until they learned it was just the American cultural way of showing you're listening, you're engaged.
Perfect example. Shows how easily we misinterpret these nonverbal signals through our own cultural filter. You really have to be mindful, especially now everything's so global.
And sticking with how we interact, formality, how we address people, that's another cultural layer, isn't it?
It definitely is. In the U.S., things tend to be pretty informal quite quickly. Using first names is common, even at work, often right away.
Seen as friendly, approachable.
Yeah. But in the UK, say, the sources suggest things might start off a bit more formal. Titles, last names, maybe until you know someone better.
As a sign of respect, maybe. Proper decorum.
That seems to be the idea. So the standard advice holds. If you're unsure, err on the side of formality.
Better safe than sorry.
Right. Start with Mr. or M's and the last name. If they say, oh, call me Sarah, then great, you adjust. It just shows sensitivity.
Okay, now for a really tricky one. Feedback. Giving it. Receiving it.
Yeah.
That can be a minefield across cultures.
Oh, absolutely. What one culture sees as helpful, constructive criticism.
Another might find totally offensive. Way too harsh.
Exactly. So, like in American culture, direct feedback is often encouraged, seen as useful for growth, usually delivered pretty straight.
But again, British culture.
Mm,
Often more subtle. More indirect language to soften the blow.
that's the tendency, yes. And that insight about a British colleague saying, that's interesting.
When they might actually mean, I don't agree at all.
Right. Knowing that little translation key can save a lot of confusion. Spotting these subtle differences in feedback styles is super valuable. Helps avoid misunderstandings in all sorts of situations.
So we've talked a lot about these specific communication style differences, but the sources also mentioned broader cultural barriers, didn't they? Things beyond just how we phrase things.
They did, yeah. It's important to remember other factors can get in the way. Obvious one. Different languages. Even with good translation, sometimes the feeling, the nuance gets lost. And there's the issue of feeling sidelined, maybe, if your English isn't as fluent as everyone else in the room. Feeling like you can't fully contribute.
And then you have things like ethnocentrism. Is that the word?
Yeah, ethnocentrism. It's that, well, natural human thing of seeing your own culture as the default, the normal way, maybe even the best way.
Which can lead you to assume your communication style is just right.
Exactly. And that kind of thinking can feed into stereotypes, those oversimplified, often negative pictures we have of whole groups of people. Often we're not even aware we hold them.
Right. And prejudice is like
Yeah.
the next step down that road. Negative feelings towards people just because they belong to a certain group.
Based on their social class, ethnicity, job, whatever. So yeah, lots of potential barriers.
It really sounds like the antidote to all this is developing cultural sensitivity, which the sources described as being aware of cultural similarities and differences, but without judging them.
Precisely. It's about recognizing these variations exist and understanding they impact how people behave, see the world, what they value. And crucially, it lets you adapt your behavior in communication.
Which is key for, well, everything these days.
Yeah.
Tailoring messages, being inclusive.
Absolutely. Enhancing your company's image, expanding globally, breaking down those barriers we talked about, really appreciating different views.
And just understanding how your words might land differently to avoid messing up unintentionally.
It all comes back to how connected we all are now.
Yeah, the sources brought that up too. Globalization, economic interdependence. It makes understanding all this cultural communication stuff absolutely vital.
It really does. I mean, think about it. Our whole global economy relies on international trade, right? No country is totally self-sufficient anymore. That's economic interdependence. Combine that with globalization, the way ideas, people, products just flow around the world
It
now.
means we have to interact with people from different backgrounds
Yeah,
all the time.
exactly. So being good at navigating these cultural differences in communication, it's not just a nice to have skill anymore. It's fundamental,
Yeah.
essential for working together, for succeeding globally.
So, wrapping up our deep dive today, the big takeaway, I guess, is that being effective in English on the world stage isn't just about grammar and vocab.
Not even close.
It really demands this deep awareness, this understanding of cultural stuff, whether it's directness, humor, idioms, nonverbals, formality, feedback styles, all of it.
Yeah, and when we develop that cultural understanding, we go beyond just swapping information. We can actually build, real connections, stronger relationships with people everywhere.
So a final thought for everyone listening.
Yeah.
Maybe take a second to think about your own communication style. How might it come across in different cultural settings?
Extras.
Yeah. Maybe next time you're talking with someone from a different background, just try to notice those little cues a bit more consciously.
You might be surprised what you pick up.
Exactly. You might learn something really useful, something that helps you connect better. Thanks for exploring all this with us today. It's fascinating stuff.
It really is. Always more to learn.